Hi again, Risa here, back with another episode of Ask Risa. This is the third in my mini-series of photography videos. The first one covered how to go about finding the right wedding photographer for you. Last week I talked about how many hours of coverage you need from your photographer on your wedding day. So if you missed either of those, you can find them here on my YouTube channel. This week I want to talk about second shooter, what they are and whether you need one. It's kind of an industry-specific term, but it's fairly self-explanatory. A second shooter is a second photographer. It's another person who's shooting photographs. Second shooter is different from a photographer's assistant. The assistant is usually someone who helps the photographer with their gear. They help with lighting setups or holding reflectors or swapping out lenses, things like that. Things that are just that they need help with, but the assistant's not actually taking photos, whereas a second shooter is taking photos at your wedding in conjunction with the primary photographer. Some wedding photographers work as a team. They always have a second shooter and they always work together. A lot of wedding photographers are husband and wife teams. It's very common. And so in that case, they almost always shoot all their weddings together. One of them's the primary, the other one is the second shooter, and they have their own style and they work really well together. Some photographers don't have a full-time second shooter, but they have a sort of a catalog of photographers, for lack of a better word, that they work with on a regular basis when they need a second shooter. A lot of people who do second shooting also serve as primary wedding photographers. They have their own business, but if they're not booked for a particular weekend and a photographer that they know needs a second, they'll trade off working as second shooters for each other. And again, they usually have their own working style and they communicate well together. Some photographers will include second shooters in their packages. So when you start looking at photographers' websites and looking at their packages, you might notice that some packages include a second shooter. Sometimes they're an add-on option, and you may not know whether it's worth it, whether you need to spend the additional few $100s to have the second shooter. And that's what I'm here to help you with today. So some instances in which you might want to have a second shooter. If you have a large guest list, if you're having more than 200 people, there's going to be a lot going on at your wedding. There are a lot of tables and there's just a lot happening, a lot of conversations, things that might be happening off, in one corner that you don't even know about because you're busy, getting married and having fun. But if you have a second shooter, they can capture a lot more of what's happening at your wedding. And so then later on, you just have more of the story of the day. Another good reason to have a second shooter is if you and your fiance are getting ready in two different locations. Let's say one of you is getting ready at the hotel where you're staying, and the other one is getting ready at the venue where you're getting married. So it's difficult for one photographer to capture the getting ready photos in two different locations, unless they're very close together. That can usually be worked out. And sometimes if you only have one photographer but two locations, if the groom is the one that's off-site, we can sort of stage some photos. We'll have him arrive to the venue, maybe not fully dressed, maybe not wearing his jacket or his tie, and he doesn't have his boutonniere on yet. And when he arrives and the photographer's already there, because the photographer's been getting photos of the bride, we can just shoot a few photos of the groom doing those last minute details. But if you do want full actual getting ready photos with both locations, it's best to have a second shooter. If you're getting married in a church, or a cathedral, and then there's a balcony, it can be super helpful to have a second shooter for that scenario because one photographer can be down on the main level with you and the priest or whoever's performing the marriage ceremony, and the other one can be up in the balcony and they can get the overhead shot looking down from the balcony into the cathedral, and some of those can be really magnificent. So it's just something to talk to your photographer about. If they don't mention second shooters on their website, you can certainly ask them if they work with second shooters and if they have one that they work with regularly. Photographers are always welcome. They welcome questions. They're happy to answer your questions. And if you're working with a full service wedding planner like me, obviously I can help you navigate those questions and help you get answers to them. And of course, I've worked with many photographers in the past, so I know which ones to work as a team all the time and which ones have seconds that they just bring along with them when requested. That's a great reason to have a wedding planner on your side, is because they they can help you get answers to these questions. So next week, I'm going to talk about the first look session, which I have mentioned a couple of times earlier in this video series. So next week, I'm going to just do an entire episode about first looks. So if you have any questions about photography or other wedding questions, leave them down there in the comments. And if you like this video, go ahead, give it a like here in YouTube. And if you want to be notified of future videos, you can subscribe and hit the little bell icon, and then you'll get notifications when I post a new video, which is every Wednesday. All right, that's it. Bye for now.